Hey, party people. Today we are going to discuss cutting. We're going to talk about cutting a sample or just a single garment in your home, just making stuff. We're going to talk about how cutting gets done in the industry. We're going to talk about pattern cards. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff related to cutting. And you're like, Zoe, you just just pin the thingy on here and you cut around it. Like, why do you need a whole video to talk about cutting? And cutting is a whole deal, y'all. There are garment professionals who just focus on cutting garments like literally their whole careers. Okay, cutting is a whole thing, and finding someone who cuts really well is a thing that exists. Okay, so let's talk about it. First of all, we did a bunch of the pattern making last week, and I think the only thing I didn't show you was adding the seam allowance, notching. Okay, but there are a couple of things I want to address. We're labeling all our patterns. Okay, so we've marked the grain lines. Okay, I'm old school. We label in the direction of the grain to kind of reinforce this is the direction, so that when you're laying out your pattern pieces, okay, here's my selvage, okay, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but always cut or start cutting at least an inch away from the actual selvage, because the yarns here are warped. Remember when we were blocking muslin and I ripped the selvage off because the yarns warp as they get finished on the edge? You don't want those finished edges on your cut garment either. And so we start cutting at least an inch away. If your fabric is noticeably distorted beyond that, just like mark the line, okay? And then we lay our pattern pieces out parallel to the selvage, our grain line. So like something like this, here's my grain. You know, we talked about bias before. Like, this is the straight grain. Your bias would run like this. And so you would lay your pattern piece like this. So wherever your grain is, it's going to be running along parallel to the selvage. And so when you look at it like this, when you lay it out parallel to the selvage, you're reading your label. Okay? I mean, you can still, it's only a few words. You can still read it, but the whole point is, oh, that's where the letters go. That's the direction the letters go. That's the direction the letters go. Like that. This is standard labeling, style number. I have a whole video on style numbers. Go watch it. Cut to self. Okay? That means we're going to cut two pieces, mirror images of each other out of the self fabric. Okay? Everything is cut to except the center front panel. This is center back. The center front panel is cut one because we just have the one. Everything else is mirror images around the corset, right? Now, if you are doing something asymmetrical, okay, let's say this is just coming across the shoulder, just like one piece, and it is important that it run right to left like that, then you need to mark it RSU, right side up. Cut one, right side up. Okay, so it's not about whether a pattern piece is symmetrical or asymmetrical. It's about whether there's a mirror image on the other side. Okay, because technically almost all of these pieces are asymmetrical. Right? So cut to self, cut to lining, cut to contrast. Okay, if we're going to have a contrast panel. Size 4, whatever your sample size is, goes here. Okay, if you're a size 12 and you're only making clothes for yourself, then this is going to be a size 12 for you. Okay, whatever your sample size should be the middle of your size run. So whatever size that is, this is my dress form, so I just mark it a size 4. And then this is panel number 8. This is center front panel. This is panel number 5. Okay, yada 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 yada. Okay. Now, when you notch, okay, there's two kinds of notches. You notch precisely 90 degrees from the sew line. So these, this one, these. Now, these are more like when you line them up, they're going to create the waistline. And so you gotta like really, when you mark notches, you need to be precise at the angle in which you mark your notches so that you are notching in the correct angle. Okay, some people, they notch so they can see the hole where the notch is gonna be. I'm so used to this where you see the point, the tip, and that's it. And see this piece? That's the grain. The waist is perpendicular to the grain, and the notches sit at an angle, whereas these notches are at a precise 90 degrees from the edge, from the sew line, excuse me. This is the center back. This is the waist, and then I have a double notch to mark the back. Okay, this is the very back, center back, back, all that good stuff. All right, back, 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 back. Something I like to do, which is not super necessary at this like very first toile stage, is to shape the seam allowances. Okay, so when I have a garment, where's my pencil? Listen, I have to turn in my manuscript for my book in a few days, and my studio is bananas. Like, I can't find nothing. So, so let's, I don't even, drawing, what's drawing? Okay, anyway. So when you have something like this, the way I learned it and the way I prefer it is for the seam allowance to be pressed towards the side seam, okay? And then when you have the back, I like those seams to also be pressed towards the side, okay? So, here's my bra cup. The seam allowance is going in this direction. This is the other side, and the seam is going this way, right? When we sew it like this, okay? And I should actually clip that. I mean, again, that part is not super important, but we should clip that. And so I cut it so that the shape follows the seam allowance as it's folding towards the side seam. Where's panel number 2? So this and this, these three sit together like this. This is the front, this is right next to it, and this is the bra cup. And these seams are going to sit back, right? This is going towards the side seam. Center front is here, side seam is over here. And so I folded it back and shaped it like that. This also is going towards the side seam, so I folded it back and shaped the side seam like that. And so forth and so forth. Here's my center back. And here's my 8. And here's my 7, right? And so this is being folded back this way towards the side seam. And this is going out towards the side seam. And this is number 7. This gets folded back towards the side seam. So I kind of fold the tops and then I shape the side seam. Okay, that's something that you can do kind of in the later parts. Like, it's not necessary to do at the first toile because you'll probably still be making a lot of corrections. But I just wanted to address that in case I forget later, okay? When you are cutting your patterns, please take care to cut right on the line, because that's the line. Don't cut outside of your pencil line, because now you're going to start adding millimeters. When you have 8 panels going across, and you're going to start accumulating a 1/4 inch here, then on the other side is another 8 panels, that's another 1/4 inch. You have added 1/2 inch to the circumference. And you know how usually we add ease to a garment? Like, we'll drape like an A-line, like a pencil skirt, and we'll drape it close to the body. And we'll typically draft in a little bit of ease for movement and for sitting and stuff. But this is a corset. There's no ease. I didn't put in any ease, because the whole point is for a very tight fit on a corset, right? And so if you start cutting outside your pencil lines and then you do it to the next iteration and the next iteration, you're starting to add millimeters, and then you're starting to add like fractions of inches and then actual inches. Okay, so really be careful when you're cutting. Now, no matter what you're cutting, whether it's paper or fabric, whether you're using your fabric scissors, whatever scissors you're using, get in the habit of laying them on the table. Okay, it gives you more control because your hand is not getting tired holding up the whole weight of the scissors. And just practice, get in the habit of always having your scissors on the table. You don't want to like lift this whole piece of fabric and start cutting up in the air, which also is not safe in pretty much any setting, even if you're by yourself. Okay, and so just get in the habit of always cutting on the table. I know some people prefer rotary cutters. I personally do not. Rotary cutters are really good for things like cutting a lot of straight lines at once. If you're doing a lot of bias strips, a lot of waistbands, that sort of thing. But I don't cut so much that I've felt the need for it. Number one, you do need a mat, a cutting mat, so you're not damaging your furniture. Number two, rotary cutters are not great for small details. And the pattern making that I have historically done involve more like small details, tight curves, little corners, more than a lot of bias strips. I don't even have my rotary cutter anymore because I really just didn't like it. And you do have to replace the blades. Scissors are sharp, scissors are easier to get sharpened. You just take them to the sharpener, whereas you do have to replace rotary blades. If you are going to use rotary cutters for working, you need a metal edged ruler. I prefer this one because it has a cork backing. I've seen some with the rubber backing, and it's harder to move. So that when you have this ruler down and you're cutting a sharp blade against the edge, this is much less likely to move and fewer accidents. These plastic rulers, I love them. I use them constantly. They are remarkably soft. And you can start like shaving off slivers, which will ruin your measurements, which will ruin your straight, crisp lines, that sort of thing. So you definitely want a metal edge ruler. This one is better because it does have the metal edge, and if you do need the measurements, this is a better option to get a graph ruler with a metal edge. Okay, but it still moves around a lot. Okay, so this is my favorite for any kind. Like I do have like box cutters and stuff when I'm cutting paper, trimming paper for presentations and stuff. And this is the ruler I always use. This one is also from college. Like I just keep stuff forever. I take good care of my stuff and I keep it forever. And then I occasionally lose them and then I buy a replacement and then I find my old one. Which is why I have more rulers than sense. This is a pattern card, and if you plan on working in the industry, you need to know what one is. And if you're working in your home studio making clothes for yourself, I still can, think you should make pattern cards for yourself so you can keep track of your own patterns, especially if it's a style that you really end up loving and want to make over and over again in different fabrics. Okay, so what a pattern card is it's not part of your tech pack. This is something that the pattern maker creates, and it lists all the pattern pieces for your pattern. So you'll have your flat here, okay, whatever, here's your corset, and you'll have a front and back flat here. You have style numbers, name, description, the size range, season, and the pattern maker. So if you have a bigger company of several pattern makers or you're freelancing a lot of people out, then you can keep track of who worked on what and, they're better equipped to make corrections on that pattern, etc., etc. You're going to list all your pieces here, okay? So we have center front, we have panels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we have center back. And we have cut 1 and then cut 2, cut 2, cut 2. for all these pieces. And then the yield. I'm not going to try to calculate the yield for this half of the bra cup. That's bananas. But you should give a general yield of the whole thing. And you do need the width of the fabric to kind of calculate this. So you could put a range in here. Notes involve things that require cutting that don't need a pattern piece, like bias strips. For like spaghetti ties, bias binding, seam finishing, those kinds of things. A lot of the time people hang their swatches here. They just staple the swatches down here if that's important, that sort of thing. So later on, when we get to fleshing out, like once we fit the toile and made the pattern corrections and we're happy and we're ready to move on to construction, we'll put in lining, mark it in green, and it'll be the same probably. You know, if you are working with a contrast paneling, those get marked in blue or purple. And then inner lining, interfacing, fusible, that sort of stuff is marked in red. Unless you just block fuse the whole thing, which means you press fusible to your final fabric, like all of it, and then you cut the whole thing out together. That's block fusing. Okay, so do create pattern cards. Like I have a freebie pattern card that's attached to the tech pack that I sell. I think I also sell individual pattern cards in my Etsy store, in my Shopify storefront. If you want your own Excel spreadsheet, or you can just make your own. It's just a spreadsheet. When you're cutting, you want to block your muslin like I showed you when I was blocking the muslin for the drape. You know, you want to lay it out and you want to block it out, you know, just like I showed you before. Different materials require different methods for cutting. Okay, leather cutting is a whole different thing. I've never worked with fur, so I don't actually know how to cut and sew fur, whether it's faux fur or real fur. Like dancing queen fabrics, like organzas and things, really slippery fabrics like charmeuses. Do better if there is some sort of paper backing. Do not get me started on the do not cut paper with the fabric thing, okay? Studios, design offices, they get their scissors sharpened regularly. It's fine, okay? It's better than imprecise cuts, okay? So that's a thing. But something like muslin, cotton poplins, shirting, something very matte, very flat, okay? This is on the fold. Here's something not to do. Like, you know what? Like, let's say you have a panel like this and center front is on fold, and you do not fold this into a crisp line and then cut one half. Just make the whole piece, because you're never going to press out this fold in the middle as well as you want to. You're just not. Okay, so just do the whole piece. Just cut the whole piece. Okay, I only do it on fold so I can do 2 layers, and I do it in muslin because it doesn't move. Okay, in the industry, you stack layers and layers and layers of fabric, and then you lay down your marker, and you take a big vertical blade and just like this through all the layers of fabric, whether it's 5 or 500, right? Those are not precise numbers, okay? Just the whole point is that's mass production for you. Now, working in the industry, you do need to create markers for the most efficient fabric usage, but we're not going to make markers today, okay? Maybe some other day. But today, we're going to lay out so that you kind of get a feel for what creating a marker looks like. When you make a marker, so here's your fabric, right? Unfolded. And this is, you know, let's say 48 inches. And then we're going to cut off an inch so that we're not using the warpy selvage. So now you have 46 inches of spread. And you're going to lay out your pattern pieces, and you're going to be very precise about making sure that you're following the grain. So graph ruler in this instance is really good. Line it up here, line it up here. so that all your pattern pieces are going parallel to the selvage. Whatever your pattern pieces look like are going parallel to the selvage, but they're also like the tightest fitting marker ever. You got to get, oh my God, one time, ask my Patreon students, one time I saw this they were interviewing this designer, and she was laying out pieces for a pattern. Okay, and I've done these kind of photo shoots before where the team comes in and they're like, pretend you're working. And so you're like, okay, here's some pattern pieces. Okay, but like, she was laying out the pattern pieces, and I don't even know if they were on grain or not, but she was laying them out. And she was laying them out so far apart like this. I'm like, no! No. How dare you? You could fit a whole nother piece in there. Maybe she was about to do that, but she had like these three pattern pieces across the fabric. And I'm like, no, knock it off. Just stop it right now. This is the worst. And I did a whole lesson on making a marker for the Patreon pattern making class, because I was like, what we're not going to do is waste this much fabric. Oh, I know. I get upset about stuff. Okay. As I am finishing up this book, I was like talking to a friend, and I was like, he's like, how's the book coming along? And I was like, the next book I write is going to be called Stuff I Argue About with People on the Internet. Fashion, Facts, and Fiction. Because people be arguing with me about the dumbest thing. Like, I said something like, don't wear open-toe shoes in a sewing factory, and they wanted to argue with me. They seriously wanted to argue with me. And they're like, what if your feet stay under your sewing table the whole time? I'm like, do you never get up to use the iron? Do you never get up to use the bathroom? Do you never get up to go talk to someone else about your work or whatever you did on the weekend? Like, you just stay there nobody stays there the whole time. If you do, you're working in a sweatshop, and you have bigger problems than your toes. And if you are working in a sweatshop, if something happens to your toes, you're screwed. Can I say that on YouTube? I try to keep it clean here, but honestly, just wear a sneaker. Don't fight me on shoes in the sewing factory, okay? Who are you trying to impress in the sewing factory anyway? Where was I? Right. So we're not going to make a marker because we're just making one garment. We don't care. But I did cut a piece, and we're going to lay out the pattern as tightly as possible while still following the grain line, okay? So, if you got to work on it a little bit, work on it a little bit. I personally really enjoy the puzzle of it. Now, you can go like this. You can go like this. And you can actually butt up right against that line if you want. It's just really like you don't want to go past that line. Like in a sewing factory, you would literally just butt them up like this because you just slide the knife in between. I mean, I'm going to cheat because it's muslin and it's got no face, but I'm going to do these up here because if I have leftovers, I would prefer the leftovers where the selvage is so that I can cut more from this piece because I know where the grain is, right? So that's my whole thing. Now, later on, when we trace these onto oak tag, like harder paper, we can do things like trace around the edges with some chalk or a marker and cut them out, which is more accurate. We're not pinning. It's actually less labor intensive. That's how you do like a lot of wool suitings. Like you'll see Savile Row tailors like chalk outlines around patterns for their clients. That's how you cut leather, because you don't want to pin leather. You just want to lay it down, put the oak tag pattern on it, and trace around it. You know, if you go to factories that do like a lot of the same leather styles, like I used to work for a place, they had new revolving designs all the time, but they also had their core classic, about a dozen styles. And so we had these patterns that were made out of like 1/4 inch thick material, and the cutters would just literally have these wooden platforms, lay out the leather and put them on, and just literally knife around these thick, fat pattern pieces. But we're just working with dot paper today, which will typically be like first pattern paper. And so we're going to pin. We're going to pin. Pin, 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 pin. Always pin only in the seam allowance as much as you possibly can. Just get into that habit so that you're not making extra holes in your main fabric. Just get in that habit. And try to keep things as flat and smooth as possible. I wish I had my flathead pins right now, actually. It makes for just like a flatter, less bumpy, slightly more accurate look, but can't find them. You know, I have them separated into different pin cushions, and I can't find my red pin cushion because my studio is a disaster. You guys, listen, okay, all joking aside, I have learned I really like writing books. And I would like to write more books. Okay. I'm thinking about writing a book on color theory for fashion. What do you all think? Because the one I used to teach with and the one I've been recommending is like out of print. And so the publisher's like, it's over $100 if you want one now. I'm like, what? And that's still the only book I recommend. And trust me, I have looked. And a lot of them are just very geeky, which I personally like. But I know that's not what my students are looking for. There isn't like a really like, a lot of them also like focus on graphic design, stuff like that, which again is not what my students need. And so I was thinking of writing a book, strictly dickly, color for fashion. Yeah, what do y'all think? But you know, in order to write another book, I have to sell a lot of these books. Okay, no one's going to give me another book deal if my first book doesn't sell. So hopefully you will buy this one and enjoy it and learn a lot from it. I really enjoyed writing it. Like the whole process of writing the book. Also, my editor is kind of bomb. Like, she's the only book editor I've ever had, so I don't know if that's normal, but she's very cool. I like her a lot. Shout out Maggie. But like, I really like writing books. I just love the just focusing intensely on the thing I love, fashion design and aspects of fashion design and teaching fashion design. And so I just want to write more books all the time now. That's my thing. And yeah, I definitely want to write a book called Stuff I Argue with People on the Internet About. Shaping the seam allowance is definitely like a production pattern move. It's like something production pattern makers do as opposed to sample pattern makers. And yes, those are two different people, two different sorts of jobs, and they focus on two completely different things. The one is not better than the other. They do different things to the pattern. And yeah, like sometimes shaping a seam allowance, not in this particular case, but sometimes shaping a seam allowance correctly will save you that corner. And when you're making hundreds of units, like saving that corner could end up with like a much tighter marker, and you're, saving a couple inches here, a couple inches there, and you could end up actually saving quite a few yards of fabric. And that is good on a cost efficiency standpoint, but also just like not wasting resources standpoint, which you all know I'm a fan of. I am a fan of that. I am going to have some color theory in this book, this current book that I'm writing, but it's not really a deep dive. It doesn't really get into all the things as much as I want to. So there is that. I mean, it's enough for you to get started, but like literally, if you want to get really good at something, and you want to focus on a thing, like you love color and you want to get really good at color theory and how to have the most beautiful color stories in your projects and that sort of thing, then you just have to deep dive it more than kind of your standard. See, if I was working on my cutting table and I wasn't trying to like stay out of the way of the camera, I would be hovering over this thing trying to make sure that my grain lines were the perfectest grain lines that ever grain lined. Let me tell you something. This book, I mean, it might kill me before I get to write another one. Because let me tell you, I went to the fabric store a while back because I needed to pick up a few more things for the book. And I was looking raggedy. Okay, I was looking real raggedy, okay? And I was at the fabric store, and I was talking to someone, and they were up on the ladder, because, customers aren't allowed on the ladder to get the stuff on the very, very high shelves. And so I asked one of the employees there, like, hi, can you grab some organza for me from the very, very top shelf? So she goes up, and I'm talking, and I'm like, oh, what is that? Is that a crepe? Like, we're just talking about fabric, and, because I'm on the floor, like, I can't really see. Like, I can only see the ends of the roll, so I'm asking her questions about fabric, and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And she was like, you sound just like that girl on YouTube. And here's the funny part to me, is she said, you sound like that girl on YouTube, because I sure did not look like the girl on YouTube. I was looking so raggedy that, like, it was totally reasonable to me that she did not recognize me at all, like my face. Because, I mean, I always wear makeup when I'm on camera because, the internet is forever, and I like to look presentable and professional when I'm on camera, like I do at lecture. And, and I was literally like, I rolled out of bed, I showered, I grabbed my husband because we wanted to go eat afterwards, after we went shopping. And so I was looking super raggedy. I mean, I was clean. I don't think I smelled, but I was not looking cute. I have big bags under my eyes. Like, I have, like, what is that really big Louis Vuitton tote, the Everfull? I had, like, Louis Vuitton tote bags under my eyes. And so she's just like, you sound like that girl on you. Yeah, I sound like I do not blame her. I've been looking real ragged lately, okay? I look real ragged lately. So, yeah, I'm like, I'm her. And she kind of was, like, very, like, really? I'm like, yeah, I know I don't look great. I've not been sleeping a whole lot lately. And she was very nice. She was very professional, okay? No talking smack about this employee. But I was just like, yeah, I sound like that girl. I don't look like that girl. Yeah. Ooh, funny, hilarious. But yeah, she was really nice, and she was like, she told the lady who was running the cash register, she was like, oh, make sure you grab her one of those pens. They have like the fabric store branded pens. She's like, make sure you give her one of those pens. Thank you. Ooh. But yeah, I came home and I was just like laughing so hard. I made a TikTok about how, you know, it's nice when you like get noticed in public when you look like hot microwaved butt. And now I'm going to cut. I'm not going to make you watch me cut. I'm just going to cut out all these shapes. And then when we are back to working on this corset, we are going to be sewing the toile. And we're going to mimic some bone channels. And we're going to not finish the edges, but we're going to stitch the edge, the sew line of the edges, so we can get a feel for how everything looks. Unfortunately, I had to take the twill tape off because I had to do some stuff with the dress form for my book. But at this point, it doesn't matter. It's just really a matter of, does it look good? But yeah, get really close and butt up against that pattern piece without shaving off any paper. You know, another reason why you got to be cutting right on that line when you cut patterns, because if you go outside the pencil line and then you trim outside that pencil line to cut, you're like adding, and then you get what I'm saying. Y'all are smarty pants. Okay, you got it. Cut your notches. If you see any overhang, just go ahead and get in there and just trim it out. And I'm going to leave it there because I actually do like to lean over and make sure that I'm getting a precise cut. So that's it for today. All the things about cutting that you probably never knew you needed to know. Drop me your questions below. Next week, we're going to take a little break from the corset and have a little fun with something else but we are going to come back to this series. Throw me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, all the ways you show me love, and I will see you in the next video.